All right, we're live.
All right. Good morning. It's February 23rd. This is Senate Health and Welfare. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everybody here this morning. Today we're going to look at the two bills that we've been working on and hope we can get to some comfort level with each of them. And then at the end of the meeting, I do want to talk very briefly about some of the issues that have been swirling around about money and federal dollars and so on. So we'll get to that a little bit. So Jen Karby is here. Jen, I know we've been working behind the scenes, and you've been working particularly hard on S22. So do we have a new draft from you on our page? So why don't we look at that together and then have you identify what's new and why, maybe a little bit be helpful.
Sure. Jennifer Karby, Legislative Counsel. So would you like me to put up the?
Yes, I think that would be good.
Okay.
We can all
Great.
see it together. And then
So you should
people
be
who
able to
are
see
out
that.
in YouTube land can also look on with us.
Great. So I did put on the top here draft amendment for committee discussion, just so that anyone who is looking at the document knows it has not been finalized and is not necessarily a proposal at this point, but has some language for you to look at. And I did put everything in bold and highlighted that is changed in this amendment so that you can see what the differences would be. So this is S22. This is an act relating to healthcare practitioners administering stem cell products not approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And the first thing we have are definitions. And so there's actually some changes right there in the definitions. The first is in the definition of healthcare practitioner. And this was a request from the Office of Professional Regulation in recognition that not all of the regulation that occurs is just from the board. Some of their boards are advisory, and so they may not be strictly doing the regulating. So they asked that make it a little bit broader so that it's an individual licensed by the Board of Medical Practice or the Office of Professional Regulation without mentioning specifically the boards. Shouldn't have a substantive impact on what I think you thought you were doing, but makes it more accurate for OPR and for their enforcement authority. Then we get into the definition of stem cell products. And the definition has definitely been an issue that we've had to deal with in trying to put this bill together. It started out with the definition just strictly using the federal law definition, which is what California's law does. There had been some current concerns raised about that last year. So there have been requests for some modifications that are in here. And as I mentioned, I think when we did the walkthrough, I've been looking at trying to clean up the definition because some of the use of the terms is either duplicative of what's sort of uses terms that are already in that definition, but uses them maybe in different ways that is confusing. And so I've been working offline with some folks who are knowledgeable in this area, trying to come up with something that maybe would make more sense. So this would now say, instead of just stem cell products, would be stem cell and stem cell related products, means any articles that contain or consist or purport to contain or consist of one or more of the following when intended for implantation, transplantation, infusion, or transfer into a human recipient, and when intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of any disease or condition. And so it would be things that contain or consist of one or more of the following. These are human cells, including cells from tissues such as adipose tissue, amniotic membrane, umbilical cord blood when not autologous, meaning in the same person or in a first or second degree relative, placenta, and other tissue or cell sources, intracellular or extracellular components or vesicles, or amniotic fluid. So it's any articles that contain or consist or purport to contain or consist of one or more of the items in A, B, and C on that list when they are intended for to be implanted, transplanted, infused, or transferred into a human, and for the purpose of diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of a disease or condition.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, Jen, this may not be a question that you can answer, but I'm looking at the phrase about when not autologous or in a first or second degree relative, and I'm wondering, how does that relate to bone marrow transplant where there's a genetic match?
This is specific to umbilical cord blood. It's just, so that's
Okay.
why I
Oh,
use the
got it.
semicolons to separate things
Thank
here.
you.
So it's, yes, it's
Okay,
just
thank
that
you.
one.
Got it.
Yep.
Senator Hardy, you had a question.
Yeah, I believe you said you were working with some national organization or something to get to this definition. Is that right, Jen? That you had been on some seminar. I can't remember the story, but that's how you got to this definition, that it's sort of from a federal or national expert organization.
Right. I mean, I'm not trying to be cagey about it. I've been talking to some people sort of offline who are with the FDA but do not speak for the FDA. So they're there's not an official agency position, but they've been nice enough to try to help me offline to come up with a definition that seemed like it was doing what you all want, sort of having the right universe of what you're trying to address.
Okay, and it does include bone marrow tissue. Is that correct or not?
I'm not
Sorry.
sure I can answer that question. To the extent that it is something that would need FDA approval and doesn't have FDA approval, I think it would be included in here in the bill. So I think it really may be talking outside of the context of bone marrow transplant, but I would need somebody else. I'm trying to get some paper to make a note. I would have to ask or have somebody else answer how it relates to bone marrow.
The reason I ask is because my understanding was that bone marrow transplant is the sort of one area that is allowed, but it's allowed under a waiver, and that's the sort of can be how people are using this loophole. But I may not have understood it correctly. We've been dealing with a lot of extremely complex medical stuff in the last week, and so I could be misremembering. So I'm just trying to get clarification. Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Sure. So the question around bone marrow is an important one. Jen, in this definition, can you help us understand what exactly we're relating to with the definition of stem cell and stem cell related products? Are we looking at those things that are not yet approved for by the FDA? And if that's the case, if they're not yet approved, then it would not include bone marrow as an approved use under a certain scope of practice.
Right. I think some of what's difficult is that I think there are certain types of products that the FDA doesn't regulate and wouldn't need to approve. So, and that's where I think we're trying to get at, not requiring somebody to disclose that what they're doing is not FDA approved if it's not even within the scope of what the FDA would approve. But also trying to get at having people understand what is and is not, sort of the FDA approval status of what is or is not being, injected into them or otherwise applied to them, and giving them that information. So I think where I'm trying to walk the line is figuring out what would require FDA approval, but has not received it. What doesn't require FDA approval, but you still want people to know that it's not FDA approved. And then what's just completely outside of the scope of FDA processes. And so So not trying to cast the net so wide that you're really involving every
Everything.
practice, yes, things that are commonly accepted as, say, the practice of medicine, but are outside of what the FDA would regulate. So I'm not doing a great job of
You are doing a great job, but it's, you're trying to include those things that would require FDA approval, but not to include those things that are outside of the purview of FDA.
And I think yes and no, because I think there are also things that you may want people to know if somebody is planning to inject it into the body, even if it's not something that would require FDA approval. So maybe it helps to go through the rest of the bill and look at the context, because I also added an additional non-applicability provision that may give some comfort to people who are
Let's do that, but let's let Senator Hooker ask her question first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jen, we discussed the use of minimally manipulated cells, and I didn't know if taking that out changed the definition at all, or why.
So again, it's my understanding, first of all, that some of that is inherent in the sort of, it gets involved in what the FDA regulates under which provision, and I think it confuses things to use that term. So there are certain things that may be minimally manipulated, but still aren't good to put in somebody's body. So just the fact of minimal manipulation alone, I don't think is dispositive in either direction.
Okay, because when we first talked about it, it seemed as if that was the limiting factor, and I didn't know if this, had an effect on who could do what. But okay.
And you will probably hear feedback from folks in the field after this definition is out, so we'll see what the reaction is. All right, so then the bill itself continues. I just added this term "and stem cell related" throughout. So we still have the notice requirement that a healthcare practitioner who administers one or more stem cell or stem cell related products that are not approved by the FDA would provide the patient with a written notice prior to administering any such product to the patient for the first time. And again, here's the same notice, just with that language added: must be provided to you under Vermont law. These are products that have not been approved by the FDA. You're encouraged to consult with your primary care provider prior to having an unapproved stem cell or stem cell related product administered to you. Still have those notice requirements as far as the size of the paper and the size of the font, and that it would include information on methods for filing a complaint with the applicable licensing authority and for making a consumer inquiry. This consumer inquiry piece was what was flagged by the Attorney General's office as maybe needing to be more specific to them. I had asked if anyone who'd been involved in the process last year thought it needed to be broader than that. I haven't heard from anyone, so to the extent you want to make this more specific about what has to be in there for consumer inquiry, I'm happy to put in language. We could even say for making a consumer inquiry to the Office of the Attorney General, if that would be helpful. Or to the Office of the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, however you want to put it.
So the system now would be complaints to OPR or Board of Medical Practice.
What do you mean now?
Well, if there were a complaint about some concern.
Or to the, well, right, so complaints. Go ahead.
Is that explicit? Do we have that explicit in this bill? That's one question. And then by adding the AG's office, does it actually make it more easier for folks and probably more powerful?
So I think, filing a complaint with the applicable licensing authority would be relevant to who the provider, who the specific healthcare practitioner was regulated by, whether or licensed by, whether it was OPR or the Board of Medical Practice. Um,
Yes, but an ordinary citizen or patient may not know that route of.
right, but it has to have information on methods for filing a complaint.
Okay,
So
got it.
I think that's
Applicable.
enough information. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
think,
no, I agree. Yeah, that's
okay. As far as making a consumer inquiry, you may want to put in something more specific there about the Attorney General's office, because otherwise it does leave some room for discretion about making a consumer inquiry. It could be, calling calling a hotline or a product manufacturer or something like that. So, so I can add.
I mean, let's just stop here for a minute. What do committee members think about adding in a reference to the AG?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's easy for Jen to add, and then it's just a little bit more clear.
And I know people who have called the AG about situations like this. So it's probably a natural thing for people to do, and just to say it to maybe consumer inquiries, including or not limited to, or, something like that.
Including's a good word. Josh, Senator Terenzini.
Yeah, I'm in concurrence with my committee members, Senator Lyon. I think it should be there.
All right, good. We'll do it. Jen, we magically will put it in there.
Yes. And I see Senator Cummings has her hand up as well.
Oh, thank you. I can't see you, Senator. Go ahead.
I can't see my mute either. I'm going to bring up that awful term, font size. Some of these newspaper ads, the headlines are an inch tall.
Well, we're not up to the ads yet. Ads are
You're not
later.
to the ads. Okay.
But I mean, we can talk about it here. This is the written notice that has to be provided to the patient
Okay.
and also posted in the office. So it has to be at least 8.5 by 11. And I think last year I had put the notice in a document and put it in 40-point font. It pretty much covers the page.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. It was the ad in the,
Right.
Okay. I mean, we're almost
Take a
there.
look
We're,
at that.
we can jump to that if you want to.
nope, that's fine.
Okay.
I just heard font size and I woke up.
It literally says 40-point type. I said
Now
font size.
we know how to wake her up.
Only when I'm working on 3 or 4 hours sleep.
Yeah, well, Senator Hooker.
Thank you. Jen, about the notification at the first appointment, and then, so if somebody goes for one treatment and then goes back to the same provider for another treatment, do they have to get another, do they have to be notified again? And we did talk about the consumer getting a copy.
Right. So that's in the next piece. That's in the
Okay.
disclosure. We've got
Okay.
notice.
Yeah.
Notice only happens at the first appointment or the first time they get the product administered, and it has to be in the office. Then the disclosure piece, that requires the disclosure form every time. So that's a good segue. The provider who administers these products must provide a disclosure form to the patient for the patient's signature prior to each administration of the product. And it must state in understandable language the product's FDA approval status. And then the provider retains a copy of the signed disclosure form in the patient's medical record. And then I added, based on your conversation last time, and shall provide a copy of the disclosure form for the patient to take home. Does that answer your questions about the?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. So that if somebody goes for treatment for arthritis once and then goes back for treatment for baldness or whatever, they have to get a disclosure form each time.
Right, or if they went for treatment for arthritis and then they went back for treatment for arthritis, they're gonna get that disclosure every time.
Okay,
The
the
notice
disclosure.
just happens once.
All right, thank you.
Sure. All right, now we're getting into advertisements. So this is Senator Cummings section. So the healthcare practitioner must include that notice in any advertisements relating to the use of stem cell or stem cell related products not approved by the FDA. In print advertisements, the notice must be clearly legible and in a font size not smaller than the largest font size used in the advertisement. And for everything else, the notice must be either clearly legible in a font size not smaller than the largest font size used or clearly spoken. Stop
Senator
there.
Cummings, you have a question.
Well, I'm just thinking of Cindy Brzezzi's full page ads. And some of those things, you know, they're over an inch high to get your attention, which means that the disclosure could take up a quarter of the page if it,
That is true.
and
They don't have to use that big font size, you know, they could reduce the size of the
right,
font.
but I don't want us to get in, you know, in trouble because it's not a reasonable requirement.
Aha,
It's reasonable to require disclosure, to have the disclosure. I mean, we all have to put that disclosure at the bottom of all of our campaign stuff. Does anybody do that in the same size font as you do vote for? I think it has to be legible and it you know, clearly legible or, you know, but I don't know that it needs to be the largest.
well, we certainly want it to be something that attracts attention so that folks know that if they're running down to the hotel room to get an injection, that it may not be efficacious for whatever they're going down there for.
Okay, you just said hotel room. We just said something about office and that
Yeah.
I wondered, are these always done in offices or are they done in hotel rooms?
I don't know. I know that in Vermont, they're done in one clinic in office.
But
And
could I go down to my local hotel conference room and get a shot?
I suppose you could set up a clinic for a day. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, Senator. I know that many states have lots of different of clinics.
I'm going to one in the auditorium this afternoon.
Exactly. Good one.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to weigh in on the font size question. And I think that I wasn't here when you put this language in last year, but my assumption is to make sure that, you know, the ads don't have such tiny font that nobody can read it.
Yeah.
And if the ad is in 16 font and we say there has to be at least half, then the disclosure would be an 8 font, and 8 font is super hard to read, especially for people in this target audience, I think, when a lot of seniors are being targeted. So I think while I understand the concern about, you know, we don't want to make it unreasonable. We have to have some safeguard to make sure that it's not so tiny that people can't see it. And if it means they have to buy a full page ad in order to have the font size big enough for people to see, I don't know if that's counterproductive or not, but we have to have some safeguard, I think. And I'm not sure what else to say to ensure that it's legible.
Senator Hooker.
I agree that we need to have something that makes it very legible and very obvious. And there's nothing that requires that the provider have a certain font size. So they can choose their font size, and then it has to be the same size. So I think that this way, and I had asked the question before, you know, are we going to force these providers to take out 2 pages of ads? Because Senator Hardy, they often do use a whole page for the ad. But I think that it's up to the provider to decide how big they want their font, and that the notice should be the same size as the largest font size they use.
So I agree with you on that, and let's we aren't telling them that they have to use a specific font size. You know, so just that if you use a large font size, make the disclaimer, the disclosure, rather, make it visible, make it the same size. So that requires some graphics and planning. You know, the other thing is the House may have something to say about this. So I think most of us agree with it. We do understand your concern, Senator Cummings.
That's fine. We spent a long time. I don't think last year we came down with that solution, but I don't know if we came to a solution.
Yeah, no, this is a good.
I know we spent a lot of time on fonts.
Right. So this is
So
the
did
language that was
Jen.
in the bill, both as introduced and as passed out of this committee was this font size language.
So
You can
the
of course
other,
change it.
the other question I think that Senator Cummings has raised is location. And I'm looking, do we specifically say office in here, or should we simply say location?
The only time we'd talk about office is that the practitioner has to display the written notice
In the practitioner's
at the
location.
at the entrance and in an area visible to patients in the healthcare practitioner's office.
Or
I know you talked about seminars being held in hotels. I don't recall specifically hearing these practices occurring in hotels.
we haven't heard that.
But you'd still have the notice and disclosure requirements, except if they was happening outside of the practitioner's office, it wouldn't have to be posted on the wall, but it would still have to be given to the patient both in the notice the first time and as the disclosure each time. That's not location based.
Okay, that helps. Question, Senator Hooker.
Senator, do other states have that type of language? Do they say office? Do they say location? Maybe we could look at that and see.
I believe they say office. It's where this language was heavily modeled on California's law. And I believe they had used office, but I can check on that.
Yeah, Washington's the other state that might have it, but
Okay.
okay. Any other,
All right, made a note.
do we need to discuss this further? No, okay, keep going.
Okay, then we get to the non-applicability. It says the provisions of this section don't apply to, and there were two different instances, and I've added a third. So it doesn't apply to a healthcare practitioner who has gotten approval or clearance for an investigational new drug or device from the FDA for the use of stem cell or stem cell related products. Does not apply to a practitioner who administers these products pursuant to an employment or other contract to administer them on behalf of or under the auspices of an institution certified by the Foundation for the Accreditation of Cellular Therapy, the National Institutes of Health Blood and Marrow Transplant Clinical Trials Network, or AABB, formerly known as the American Association of Blood Banks. And then I've added a third, which is a healthcare practitioner who has documentation from the FDA certifying that approval is not necessary for the practitioner's specific usage of the stem cell or stem cell related products. So I think that's really where we hopefully avoid the concerns about requiring somebody to make disclosures of something that doesn't need FDA approval. If the FDA has given them something in writing saying, you can do this, it doesn't require our approval, then they don't have to do the disclosure and the notice and all of that. So it doesn't apply if the FDA has said FDA approval is not necessary for this use.
That is very helpful. Yes, go ahead.
Is this where last year I think they were athletic trainers, they take out your blood, they centrifuge it, and they give you highly enriched platelet blood back? I
Or
haven't
red
gotten
cells.
any emails, so is this what's gotten them happy?
If it's something that does not, so I think if it's something that's FDA approved or something the FDA says doesn't require approval, then they would
I think
be,
I think my memory serves, this was the one thing that the FDA didn't need.
okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other thing though is, well, it may be approved by the FDA. It might not be approved when you go to get into a bike race.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
But
And
I
then
think it was packed red cells. I'm not sure it was platelets.
I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it was something.
But they wrote a lot of emails.
Yes, they did.
All right, so then we still have a violation of this section is unprofessional conduct under the OPR and Board of Medical Practice statutes. And then the next two sections make it so. And I added just again that or stem cell related. But otherwise it's the same. And then I took out section 4 that you had been asked by a few different witnesses. This is the advanced directive rulemaking piece to take out of the bill. So I've taken that out and just renumbered the effective date section.
Okay, all right, let's go back through the whole, just go back to the top. Are there any sections here or first, I think we need to get some clarification on the definition. That would help. And I think our national expert, who we happen to have in the state, is Dr. Weiss. So, and you've reached out to members of the FDA, so maybe we could get some, I think, helpful explanation of how this definition works.
Yep. I mean, I think it is a pretty broad definition, but I think that new last, non-applicability piece helps. So if something is FDA approved or
Right.
does not require FDA approval for the way it's being used, then the provisions don't apply. Everything else, the provisions apply. So I think it's a pretty broad definition, but it's cabined with those two exceptions.
The issue is that here for us is there is FDA oversight on this, but we want to ensure that whatever is happening in our state is FDA approved and that patients are not being put in jeopardy, either financial jeopardy or health jeopardy. So the overarching provision that what you have at the end really helps to ensure that anything that's done in the state that is not FDA approved will have notice put out to patients. Didn't say that exactly right, but does that make sense to all of us at this point? Okay. So committee, I'm just asking for your thoughts on the bill as Jen has presented it at this point. Are we comfortable with the changes that are in the bill? And knowing, of course, that we'll get some confirmation of the stem cell and stem cell related product definition to ensure that it's not under or over reaching. But just in terms of the bill itself, how are we feeling? Go ahead, just go ahead, because I can't see everybody.
I'm fine with it. I think if we get confirmation that the definition covers the appropriate
Stuff.
universe, then I'm fine with it. Then adding that little language on the AG's office, and I think that was the only other thing.
Okay. Anything else? The font size will probably be a thorn in somebody's side, and I'm sure that will be a fun conversation once the bill moves over to the House. Anything else? We're good? All right, Jen, why don't we put this together then? And there you are. Why don't we put this together and then when we come back to it, hopefully we'll be able to have a final discussion and then put it up for vote, not maybe not the first day we come back, but the next day we come back to it. And if we can do that sometime this week, it would be terrific.
Yes, I think I'm actually with you all morning tomorrow.
You are.
Yes, although you're taking testimony, I guess that's a lot.
Yeah, we are. We've got a lot of testimony, but we'll
But
see.
you do have the flexibility bill, and that's just me, so.
Yeah.
So I can work on this
Right.
language.
Okay,
Yeah, we can see if we've gotten any feedback since then too.
all right. Okay, this is good. Any other questions for Jen on S22? So I think Senator Hardy, you had referenced some kind of conference or something, and that is this afternoon. I will be presenting this bill to the Regenerative Medicine Forum, and on a panel. It's a short presentation. I've got a little PowerPoint for it. So it is about the bill and clarity. At that point, there may be some folks who can offer clarity on the definition. We'll see how that goes. I don't have the new definition in my PowerPoint, and I haven't sent the new bill out to them because we hadn't discussed it. So, but maybe we can ask for some clarity, and I can connect with some of those folks. Okay, so let us, we're in typical form. Nellie, is there anything else, Jen, we should know about this one?
Not currently.
Okay, all right. And as you go through the bill again, if any of you have concerns, just send an email out to everyone and let Jen know. Connect with Jen. Be good. Okay, and I still think the font size is interesting, but they don't have to use the full page big font, and yeah. Anyway. All right, so let's move on to S48. Nellie, maybe you could let Amarin know that we're ready to look at that. And I think Nolan is here. And Nolan, are you there? There you are. You have a fiscal note on S48, and we have that on our our little document page. So why don't we look at that right now together while we're waiting?
Sure. Maybe Nellie could pull it up. It should be, maybe it's not, oh, it should be posted on your.
It is, we have it.
Okay, I can easily walk through it. I don't know if people just want to look at it on their own, or if you want.
Nellie, do you want to pull up that, are you there? Are you back?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I can do it. I have screen share.
Okay, all right, good.
Can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Yes, yeah, we can see it.
All right, so for the record, Nolan Langwell, the Joint Fiscal Office. I spoke with Lauren Hibbert at OPR, who was very helpful, and she steered me to some reports that had been done recently, which were also very helpful. And so, as you know, this bill proposes the state adopt and enter into the Interstate Nurse Licensure Compact. According to these reports from OPR, there are approximately 4,700 Vermont licensees who are from other compact states that would no longer need to obtain a Vermont license if we joined this compact. And that accounts for about 25% of the total nurse licensees. So as a result, it's estimated that it would be a revenue reduction of between $900,000 and $1 million from the loss of nursing licensing revenues. Currently, all these fees, they're managed by the Secretary of State's office, and they're used to fund the State Board of Nursing. So if you were to reduce the funding there, it would reduce funding from the Board of Nursing, and those reductions would likely be offset by increasing of the licensing fee or finding other administrative efficiencies. So in short, it would be an estimated revenue loss of between $900,000 and $1 million.
Okay, Thank you. Why don't you, let's ask questions first about the fiscal note itself, and then we'll have a discussion. So it's the fee loss for nurses from compact states that we currently receive. And so the question I have is, in your conversation with Lauren, do these nurses represent traveling nurses? Do you know if that's
I
that's
don't
who-
know.
Okay.
I think, I don't think they would know, honestly.
Yeah, they're probably
But
not.
I think they just know how many people are purchasing licenses.
Okay. Senator Hardy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. Do you know how long a nurse license is? How many years? Is it renewed every 2 years, 3 years? Because this loss in revenue wouldn't be all at once in FY23 or in FY22, right? It would be over the course of the next few years as these licenses are not renewed because they would be getting compact licenses. Isn't that true?
My understanding is that this would be an annual impact, but that's a good question to follow up with. Let me see here if there is a financial impact.
Would
Yeah.
you, can
I will
you,
follow up with that because it's also rolling, right? You might buy, even if it's a 2-year license, but that's a good question. So let me follow up. How often?
Yeah, my understanding is it's rolling. I can't remember if nurse licenses, how many years they are, 2 or 3 years maybe. So it wouldn't,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have a single year impact. And then the other question, I mean, my impression from the testimony we got from Lauren Hibbert was that she and OPR are very supportive of this bill. But do you have more information on how much they would have to increase nurse license fees, or what kind of savings they might be able to find? This is pretty big. I mean, $1 million is still a lot of money for little Vermont. So wondering how they're going to do that.
Yeah, she didn't say how. I remember reading somewhere that their budget was like 4 million. So this is about 25% of that. And she just said that that's how they would, they're already doing stuff now by looking at like different efficiencies and in terms of like building costs and other costs. And I don't know, you'd have to talk to them about how they would do that, and what they'd have to increase it to. And maybe they have some sense of what it is, or they don't.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this means they would have reduced workload because of the compact, and that could help them find efficiencies, or if they're going to have to do the same amount of work regardless of what kind of licensor there is.
I couldn't imagine.
I don't want them to be hamstrung and not be able to do their work.
Look, it may not be reduced workload, because once the compact begins, then they're also going to have to weigh in on all the work that goes on there. But
by the way, I just apparently Lauren's watching.
Oh, good. Ask her if she would like to zoom in. Nellie, can you link Lauren with Zoom so she can zoom in if she would like to? That would be terrific.
Yeah, and she basically said they all expire at the same time, and it's a 2-year license.
Right.
So that would essentially knock the note in half. So I thought it was a year annually. So I'm glad you asked the question.
So it would be 450,000. Senator Cummings is itching to get.
Yeah, we did the nurse licensing bill maybe 2 years ago, and my memory says that our nurse license fees are high.
Yes, they are.
They're significantly higher than Maine. I remember saying, why should I pay? And we did cut back on the license for first year, your first license fee, because the testimony was, why should I pay 125 is sticking in my mind in Vermont when I can go to Maine and pay 40 something and be licensed in all these other states. So, and we were told that Maine had a lot more nurses, and thus the cost was spread out, and that's why we were so much more. But I don't think that we're going to get $1 million by raising all the fees. We may find that if the compact fee is less, I guess I have to be, Vermont's my residence, I have to have a Vermont license. Okay. So we won't lose that. Okay.
Any other questions for Nolan on this? And Nellie, I don't know that Lauren Hibbert has would like to testify today, but so we'll hold that thought. But
I just
Nolan, if you-
emailed her the Zoom info if she's free.
Okay, all right. But Nolan, it would be helpful if you don't mind reaching out to Lauren to clarify some of the questions that have been asked about.
Well, the only question I found that need to follow up on was how frequently the fee was, which I'm just going to change it to biannual. What was the other question?
The other question was how they're going to compensate for the loss.
I think you asked them that.
We will.
Should ask them.
Let them, we'll do it. We'll get Lauren in and she's
All right.
listening, so.
Here she is.
Wait,
There she
so Amran, with all due respect, we've moved on into the fiscal note, so we'll get to the bill in just a minute. You're
Sure.
actually early, so that's good. Rebecca, you're here, and I don't know if you were going to comment on this bill.
Hi, Senator. Yes, this is Rebecca Foch with the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. And I wanted to make myself available for any questions. I know that there were some financial questions involving the commission and what the commission can and cannot do. So I wanted to get to that. One thing,
yes.
if I could mention in regards to the fiscal aspect.
Listen, what would be helpful is if you would hold off on that until we've had an opportunity to talk with Lauren Hibbert of OPR.
Yes,
and then
of course.
we'll go back to you and get your full testimony, because I know there are a lot of questions about what you have just brought up. And thank you for being here. Lauren, go ahead. So here we are, and you're muted. You're still muted. Now you're good.
One would hope I would know this by now. Good morning, Lauren Hibbert, Director of the Office of Professional Regulation. Thanks for inviting me in. So nurses, there's two groups of them, the APRNs and the APRNs and the RNs are together, and then the LPNs are separate. The LPNs expire on even years, so but after the effective date of this bill. So we will not know the budget impact for LPNs until 2024. And then for RNs, they renew on odd years. So we'll start to feel the budget impact in 2023, in March of 2023.
And APRNs are not covered by the compact.
Well, the RN, an APRN has two credentials. They have the APRN credential and the RN credential. So if you're an APRN, you must get a RN license as the core of that license. So they are interrelated, but not totally dependent on each other.
Okay, let's clarify that. So if you are an APRN, you could get an RN compact license, but you could not practice as an APRN in a compact state other than your home state.
As an APRN, yes, that is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's always more complicated than it looks. Okay, so with all of that information, then, is that how you come down to the 900,000?
Yes.
Now we understood it was annual, but it sounds like we're not going to know for a couple of years.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct. That's why I am not recommending any fee changes at this time, because I want to understand what the actual fee impact will be. We're projecting that fee impact because of the number, as Nolan said, the number of folks who are licensed in a compact state who we anticipate will not require a separate Vermont license, because they'll be able to operate in Vermont, either doing telehealth or traveling to Vermont, the two buckets. So they wouldn't need a Vermont license because they would be able to use their compact license from their home state.
Okay. All right. The other question that came up is how your office would compensate for the loss of revenue.
So we're looking always at driving costs down through other efficiencies. We did just finish a huge IT spend to upgrade our licensing system, which was very necessary and proved to be very important during COVID, obviously. But so we had an outdated system that we updated, and so that cost drove up license fees. And then we're also looking at savings with space and personnel, trying to maximize the number of licensees in the office and draw down the cost per licensee overall.
Okay. So it sounds like this is not going to be an immediate decision-making process, but rather as you look and see what the decreased revenues are. Am I?
That's
listening to that?
absolutely correct. That is what I'm saying. Yes, we do not see an immediate budget shortfall, and we want to see what the impact is over the next really 3 years to understand it. And I'm hopeful that we won't need to raise nurses' fees. Senator Cummings is absolutely correct. We do have higher nursing fees than many of our sister states, and that's not something that we want to continue, but it is a direct result of us being siloed special funds, not receiving any funds from the general fund, having to support ourselves. And some of the costs of administrating a licensing program are the same whether you're a big state or a small state. And this is a small state problem that we have.
Aren't we lucky?
We are.
There's good things about small states, but then there are these things. Senator Cummings, did you want to make a comment from your role in finance? Or here, either way?
No, we had the fight over the nurse licensing fees last time we did them. No, I actually had a question for the other witness when we
Okay.
get to her.
Okay, all right. So we have some clarity on the issues related to the fiscal note that Nolan has brought us. And after we've gone through the bill with Ameren, we'll come back to this for a discussion in the full context of the bill. Though my last question for you, Lauren, I think it's my last, might not be, but given all of the financial issues that we're learning about and the loss of revenue, do you still support the bill as wholeheartedly as you did a bit ago?
Yes, I do. And the costs to the nursing fund have been the concern of OPR since the initial conversations of the compact. We could see that this was going to happen and that it was going to impact the nursing special fund. So this has been something that has been calculated and discussed for a long time. And one of the reports that I did refer Nolan to was we wrote 2 reports that we submitted to the legislature on the nurse compact. The first outlining the benefits of the nurse compact. And the second, we surveyed all of our licensees about how they felt about the compact. And in our survey, we specifically asked and explained that there could be a potential budget impact and that this could lead to the rise of fees. And nurses still overwhelmingly supported the compact. So it isn't only that OPR supports the compact for all of the reasons that I've testified, it's that the nurses who we license support the compact, which is why I advocate on its behalf.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Senator Hooker.
Thank you. Lauren, can you just tell me what the fee is
The current renewal fee is $190 for every 2 years.
But it's less for a new student, a new nurse.
If you are applying, I don't have that right in front of me, Senator Hooker, but I believe it's $100 to apply for a nurse license.
Okay. And during this kind of transition period, nurses would have to continue to pay the licensing fee plus the fee to belong to the compact?
No, the licensing fee will cover the compact license. So it's one fee, whether you have a single state license or a compact license. We're going to proceed with just having one fee regardless of what type of license you acquire.
Thank
The
you.
only difference is there will be, as we start to move forward with this, there will be a cost of fingerprinting nurses, and that is approximately $30, and nurses will have to pay that fingerprint fee.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure.
Okay. And that doesn't change, so they don't have to do that annually.
That's correct. It's a one-time. Yeah.
Hope our fingerprints don't change. Okay, any other questions for Lauren? Thank you. Very helpful. And thanks for dropping in on short notice.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Senator Hooker
I
has
do have
one
a
more.
Please.
There she
Do
goes.
you have percentages of, or the numbers for LPNs as opposed to RNs? Oh,
I do have that, Senator Hooker. I don't have it at the ready, but I can provide it for you. I believe we're somewhere around 18,000 RNs and somewhere closer to maybe 10,000 LPNs. But I will check that number. It's easy for me to check and I'll get back to you.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for Lauren Hibbert? All right, thank you. All right, so Rebecca, please pronounce your last name for us, and if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then provide some comments, and we do have questions for you, so,
Sure.
and thank you for being here.
Of course. Rebecca Fatch, it rhymes with Scotch. That might be helpful to know. Yep. I am with the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, and we are the drafters of the compact. So I am here today to help answer some of those questions on the commission, what the commission can and cannot do, and the finances in relation to the commission. So I can either, Senator, wait for specific questions on that, or if you'd like me to just start explaining it, I can do that as well.
Why don't you go ahead with some explanation, and then we'll just take a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll have questions for you. We've had them right along, so.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
So the commission is made up of the head of the Board of Nursing of each state, and they together make decisions. Typically, for rulemaking or for most of the decisions, it's a majority is needed. However, when it comes to the provision about incurring any kind of debt or any sort of financial obligation, every state must approve or sign off on that before the commission can acquire that obligation. So that is one change. I want to have the language pulled up right away. So I believe there was some concern that the executive director of the Board of Nursing would be able to singularly enter into some sort of large, mortgage agreement, and that Vermont would then be responsible for that obligation. And that is not the case unless, I suppose, unless your EO was kind of defecting from what Vermont wanted. And if the committee would feel more comfortable putting something in place where the EO would need approval by the governor or some sort of an approval process, the compact would be fine with that, because the intent is that the state is entering into this willingly when it comes to any kind of a financial, incurring any financial obligation. And then another thing I wanted to add to that, just to kind of put it in context, is the commission has never done this. So it's been in operation for 21 years, and it has never incurred any obligation, financial obligation like that. This is part of kind of compact boilerplate language that is in there just in case something like this would be needed in the future. So sometimes that's helpful to know too, that practically speaking, this has never been used, but in case it may be needed, 50 years from now, we don't know. That's why the language is contained in that. Hopefully that's a helpful explanation as far as.
It is extremely
Good.
helpful. I think you've
Good.
answered a lot of the questions that we were asking. Not all of them yet, because I see some hands up, and I do have a question. I have a question first, and then Senator Cummings definitely has a question. I have a couple. Two things I'm hearing. One is that we could add language that requires some state approval before debt incurrence of a specific amount. So if it could be 5,000, could be 20,000, could be 100,000, whatever it is, we could put some condition in place that would require us, maybe our joint fiscal committee or however it happens, offer approval for that debt incurrence. That's what I'm hearing you say. We could put something in.
Yes, and that's correct, because that would simply, in the compact's eyes, be clarifying what is already required in the compact.
Okay, good. And so that's one. My question really, and I know Senator Cummings will probably want to come back to the debt question, but before we get there, very briefly, there is a provision in there for rulemaking, and what process do the rules go through? Does each state have any approval other than the representative from the state on the rules that are drafted and then approved?
Sure. So that rulemaking ability is part of the commission, and when the rules are promulgated, they do have full force and effective law in that state, and that is consistent with all of the healthcare compacts. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that the rulemaking ability is limited to the administration of the compact, so it can only speak to the operations of the compact. There could never be any rules that would affect scope of practice in a state or additional licensure requirements, because that is, the licensure requirements are already in the statute, and that would be beyond the scope of their rulemaking ability. So you typically, it's to kind of parse out and clarify some things that have been confusing as the compact has kind of run its course, and it is just like I said, it's very limited in nature, and each state does have the one vote. Typically, maybe exclusively so far, it's always been unanimous, but that is yes, that is the process for it. And then the different kind of safeguards or transparency aspects of that rulemaking have been modeled after the Federal Administrative Procedure Act. So there is a notice of the rulemaking, there's an opportunity for comment, and all of those kind of transparency, and those are outlined in the compact language.
Okay, thank you. All right, Senator Cummings, you had a question.
No, I think I got the answer. That they do have the power to incur debt, and no, they never have, and they may never. But money people are distrustful. I'd feel better if, any commitment for debt over a certain amount, or any commitment of debt, get the approval of probably the Joint Fiscal Committee. I'm hesitant to say anything has to go through full legislative process, but because we do every grant that comes to the state, and it could we get an email, and unless we object in 10 days, it goes through. So we could set it up like that.
Yeah, and yes, and I'm sorry, just that the compact, like I said, requires that state approval, and if Vermont would feel
Well,
more comfortable that it
if-
be,
I mean, state approval would mean that the director of the Board of Nursing, right, has to vote to approve.
Right.
I'm not going to, tell the director of the nursing what's good nursing practice. But what's good financial practice, I think, needs, because this is it just says they can incur debt. So I'd like to have some. I can't think of anyone else who can incur debt for the state of Vermont without any kind of oversight.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the joint fiscal grant process includes notice to committee chairs, so the committees can weigh in on the request. So I think.
Do you get notices of all the?
Oh, yes, I get
Okay.
everyone, and I reply. I research and reply, or not. And when I reply, okay, it means I've researched it, looks good. Or if I haven't, if I think it needs some fix or change, I reply, and that goes to Joint Fiscal Office, and then to, I believe, the chair, or I don't know who gets the final whatever I say, but it becomes part of the
Unless
discussion.
someone asks to have it brought up at a meeting,
Yeah.
it goes through if it's not objected to. And I know we put increased notification through for the CRF funds,
Right.
but I guess finance doesn't get a lot of grants, so I don't get those. Well, I get them for joint fiscal, so.
Okay, Senator Hardy, you had a question.
Thank you. I think it totally makes sense to put some kind of provision that says the Board of Nursing director has to get joint fiscal approval. That seems pretty easy. Rebecca, I have a question about, is there a fee for each state to be a part of the compact? Because that was not in our fiscal note that we just looked at. So I'm wondering, how much does it cost each state, and what is it based on? Is it just a flat rate, or is it based on population, or what?
yep, there is a fee. The fee annually is $6,000, and that's a flat fee.
Okay.
So that is, all states pay the $6,000. One other thing, if I could mention about the fiscal note, sometimes, and I'm not sure what the number would be, but there is an offset to the licensure, the revenue loss from the nurses that no longer need a Vermont license because they have a residence in a compact state, that I think it was 450,000. There is some offset typically because there are usually nurses that live in Vermont but are working in a different state that also that may not have a Vermont license because they have a New Hampshire license, let's say. So those nurses would then need to be licensed in Vermont and pay that licensure fee, which they may not have been doing previously. I certainly don't think it would be 25% of your nurses, but sometimes that does make an impact on that kind of final number.
Okay, that's helpful. And so, Laura, I guess this is a question for Laura, and thank you for sticking around. That $6,000, are you absorbing that in your budget? Is that, I mean, it's not a lot of money, but you don't have a huge budget, so.
Yes, we did find that the $6,000 would be able to be absorbed fairly easily. And I think Rebecca could probably speak more closely to how the compact is able to operate on such a low budget from the states. But it's my understanding that it's strongly supported by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. So it has a strong underwriter, and that's why the burden on the states is so small, is my understanding. But Rebecca may be able to speak more closely to that than I.
Great, thank you. Is that true, Rebecca, or did you want to
Yeah.
say more to that?
That is accurate. And that's the way it's been for the past 20 years. So since the membership of NCSBN is the heads of or the boards of nursing in each state, we want to support those boards as much as we can. So some of the financials that other compacts have to incur, like mortgaging or leasing out a space, the NLC does not have to do because that space is through NCSBN. So, and there is a memorandum of understanding that is in place that kind of outlines that help that NCSBN gives.
Okay,
So yes, thank you, Lauren, that's accurate.
One more question for you. This may have been in the bill, but we haven't gone over it for a while, and it's a really long bill.
So, sure is.
I'm just curious, are there, aside from being the whole licensing flexibility when you're part of the compact for an individual nurse, are there professional development benefits or anything like that? Do you offer seminars or any kind of professional development that may be helpful, or other things that a nurse or a state would get aside from all the licensing flexibilities and stuff?
Yeah. So the commission does have certain, committees that are formed that in regards to the rulemaking or policy to help, the education of the compact. And I know they are starting a conference each year. So a lot of the resources that the compact has is to the states, so to the boards of nursing, to help educate their staff and their members on how the compact operates. But it's more so, it's less about kind of any practice development and more about how they are kind of education in how to operate within the compact, because the goal of the compact, or I shouldn't say the goal, what's required is uniformity in the compact. All the states need to make sure that they're administering the compact in the same way. So that's a lot of what kind of the extra resources are geared to for the compact.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, Lauren.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Just wanted to add, it's sort of related, certainly related fiscally. The state of Vermont, upon passage of the compact, will be applying for a grant from NCSBN, and it's our understanding that both states have been granted grants of some dollar amount, varying amounts, and it could be everything from helping us with this fee offset to helping us with outreach and communication and operationalization of the compact. So we will be pursuing that to help us with our operations costs, and also probably our licensure anticipated budget problem.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Rebecca or Lauren at this point? So it rhymes with Scotch, and we're glad to know that.
Senator, can I clarify something that Lauren just said?
Yes, please.
Lauren's completely right. We do have this grant program, and things like, I believe before it was discussed that there could be up to $10,000 to $15,000 implementation costs for the IT infrastructure. That is something that the grant could cover. The communications, as Lauren said. The one thing that the grant does not cover is any continuing loss, so continuing funding. So for instance, the grant program couldn't cover the $450,000 licensure loss on a annual basis. It's one-time fees to help the states set up and be ready to implement the compact.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Let's move into the bill then with Ameren. And Ameren, I know you've been working on looking at some of this from our state perspective on what's happening with other compacts. So why don't you dive in, and we should probably go through some of the sections of the bill, but I think you did hear one of the things we'd like to add to the bill, and that is some kind of an approval process for debt incurrence. So why don't we do that? Do you have something for us first, or do you want to just pull the bill up? How do you want to go? It's up to you.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Ameren Abergele, Legislative Counsel. I guess, why don't we start with the bill itself? Will people be following on their secondary devices, or shall I screen share?
I kind of like screen share because then we're all on the same page.
Right.
Okay.
Just make sure I have the right.
It's still as
Document here.
introduced, is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm going to screen share my copy, which has my sort of reader highlights. Makes it a little bit easier to navigate through the bill. How much of a refresher would the committee like on bill contents as a whole, or do we want to dive into specific?
I think if we
sections?
could, scroll through at an extremely high level, and then where we are making a suggestion of change, and I think we just have one right now, we
Mhm.
can go to that. Unless people really want to dive into any other section, I think we're feeling comfortable with the other parts of the bill.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is S48 as introduced, proposing that the state adopt and enter the Interstate Nurse Licensure Compact. As with all compacts, this is essentially a contract that the state is entering into as a member of the compact. So all of the language that you see in here up until the last section is the language of the compact, which we have not changed other than for formatting purposes. There are findings and declarations of purpose. Definitions, we covered the definitions a few times just to talk about what it means to be a home state, which nurse licenses are covered by this compact, what it means to be a party state and a remote state. The general provision that a multi-state license is to practice registered or licensed practical or vocational nursing issued by a home state to a resident in that state, saying that they will be recognized by each party state as authorizing a nurse to practice as an RN or an LPN VN under a multi-state licensure privilege. Each state must implement procedures for considering the criminal history records of applicants. There are a series of requirements that we have gone over from page 6 into page 7. That is a series of 11 requirements. We've discussed how each party state may take adverse action against a nurse's multi-state licensure privilege in terms of how that nurse practices within the party state, noting that a home state is the state that has the only state that has the ability to affect the nurse's multi-state license itself. We discussed how nurses are able to still get a single state license. Now I'm down on page 10. Okay, and these are about the applications for licensure in a party state. A nurse may only hold one multi-state license. There are parameters about how a nurse must change her multi-state license if he or she changes her primary state, his or her primary state of residence. And then there is a section on authority invested in party state licensing boards and discusses what authority each licensing board has in relation to a nurse's multi-state license and ability to practice in a party state. A section here noting that there must be a biometric-based fingerprint or other criminal background check. And At the bottom of page 13 into page 14, there's a section all about the Coordinated Licensure Information System, which, as we discussed, has this is run by the commission. Each party state has to submit information into the licensing system. There are restrictions on the disclosure of information that has been submitted into the system. And those are outlined on page 14 and 15. There's requirements for what information a state must submit. Those are at the bottom of page 15, and those are also further outlined by rule. And beginning on page 16, there's the establishment of the commission, which we have gone over in some detail. Each party state shall have and be limited to one administrator, which will be the head of the state licensing board or designee. Each administrator has one vote. And then there are details and requirements in here about how the commission meets and under what circumstances they may have a closed non-public meeting. That's through page 18. On page 19, the commission is able to prescribe bylaws or rules to govern its own conduct in order to in order to carry out the purposes and powers of the compact. I'm going to move down to page 21. This is about the powers of the commission. And I believe one of the topics that has been discussed is the commission's ability to, borrow money, and to what extent. Yes.
Let's that's this section. So let's spend a little bit of time on that on page. That includes page 23. Is it both pages?
I believe it is one of the, yes, it's from page 22 into 23. I will say, because it is important to keep compact language as it is in its form that we receive it, to the extent we want to vary or expand upon it, I would recommend we move down to the last section where we have a section that designates who would be the administrator for the state of Vermont. We could refer to these sections up here within the compact and say, for the purposes of authorizing the commission to extend the credit of the state under section, and then we can pinpoint here and say the administrator shall, and then outline there. But in terms of the language that we were looking at, that is on page 22 and 23.
Okay. Good. So we've captured that section that has been of great concern to us, and in particular Senator Cummings. So we know where that is. Keep going.
Yes. And so I just wanted to point out that the annual assessment that has been mentioned is on page 23, an annual assessment from each party to cover the cost of its operations.
Is there, I understand, I know we took testimony that indicating that it was $6,000 very early in this, and so everybody's forgotten it, but today we were reminded. The question I have is, would an increase in this fee also be captured, depending on what cap we put on or umbrella we put on, be captured in our final statement about approval? Or will we have to refer to this directly? I mean, so suppose the annual fee was increased to $100,000. It probably won't be, but just suppose. It would only be captured if we reference it in our last little section that talks about approval. So we'd have to say something like, if the annual fee is raised more than X% or above a certain level, then it would be included in this approval process. I mean, we could do that.
So the two fiscal issues which the committee has discussed are the administrator's ability and authority to sign on to the use of the state's credit by the
Right.
commission.
Right.
Then you also have the annual assessment. The annual assessment does not require I don't believe, the administrator to agree to it. So although perhaps we should get clarification since we have someone here who can answer that question, perhaps. But it could be a trigger for withdrawal from the compact.
Jenny?
Okay, Senator Cummings.
Yeah, we can check. There's all kinds of insurance compacts with multi-state licensing that have fees. I'm not concerned about that because if they raise the fee to $100,000, we can say goodbye and we don't owe the 100,000. What concerned me was if we're in the compact when they incur debt, we are liable for that debt even if we leave the compact. And that to me is more concerning.
Okay. Got it. So we're okay with leaving this as it is because it's a trigger that might end the relationship, have us pull out. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, keep going.
Okay, so section 3, right below the annual assessment section, is the section that says the commission shall not incur obligations of any kind prior to securing the funds adequate to meet the same, nor shall the commission pledge the credit of any of the party states, except by and with the authorization of such party state. And this is the section that I would recommend referring to if you're going to place restrictions on what the administrator may agree to on behalf of the state.
Okay, so we would put that in a separate section at the end of the bill?
Can we
Or
go,
would we put
what
it
did
here?
it shall not incur obligations? By and with the authority of such party state.
So the question is.
What is that?
Well, that's what we talked about earlier. Do we want to define that as being approval through the joint fiscal committee? So my question is, if we're going to have that approval process, then does it belong here? Or does it belong in a little separate section at the end of the bill? And Amber, I don't know the answer to that.
Maybe we should just ask joint fiscal. Because that phrase I don't remember going over. We could ask joint fiscal if they think that's enough of a protection.
Is
Or if
Nolan
we
still here?
Well, no, yeah.
Nolan is here. Nolan, are you here? Yeah, here he is.
What's the question? I'm sorry. Multitasking.
Yeah, we know. It's okay. So Senator Cummings, you want to ask the question?
Okay, I was concerned about the part that said that the board of the compact board could incur debt and that the state of Vermont would be liable for that debt even if they left the compact. So I was looking for some look-see, but we just got to this. The commission shall not incur obligations of any kind prior to securing the funds adequate to meet the same, nor shall the commission pledge the credit of any of the party states except by and with the authority of such party state. And it's probably a question for the lawyers, is that enough protection? I mean, right now, nobody's incurred anything. But 20 years down the road, they might decide they need a nice big building. And I can't think of anyone who can. Yeah, I think it's just wordsmithing. That's
So the question I think you're asking, and Nolan, that's being asked is, in that little section 3 that we have up,
Yeah.
with the authority of such party state, is that sufficient protection? Does that mean that the one person who is on the board, the compact board, can that one person make that approval on behalf of the state? Or do we need greater clarification? So it says of such party state. So we're looking for your input from a joint fiscal perspective.
I was thinking of having it go through the way we do grants through the Joint Fiscal Committee, and set up that kind of a structure where there'd be notification, and unless we took action within X number of days, they could approve it. But it would require that kind of a set of eyes somewhere. And if Joint Fiscal's looking at it, the administration, I'm sure, would look at it.
So Nolan, that's the question, is from your perspective, would a joint fiscal process be appropriate here?
It could be. I mean, for those who aren't familiar with the joint fiscal process, is when grants come through, they go through the joint fiscal committee, they get submitted, they review them, and they approve them. And I think that could work in that if you have the Secretary of State's office or whoever, OPR, submit it to the joint fiscal committee for approval. I mean, I understand you want to protect yourself from any undue, unforeseen potential fiscal obligations. So yeah, I think that, to me, off the top of my head, that makes complete sense. I mean,
So
want to weigh in from, I'd want Steve to weigh in and confirm that, but to me, it seems like if you're concerned, it doesn't seem like a bad idea at all.
So can we add this to your list of to do? Can you connect with Steve about this on our behalf?
Sure.
Ameren, or does Ameren, I think it's probably you and Ameren who just link in Ameren on that.
Sure, I think, yeah, I can connect with Ameren about how to draft it, and I'll just check in with Steve, which I'm sure will be fine.
Okay. Ameren, does this make sense to you? Would it go right here in this section of the bill?
I would put it in the section at the bottom of the bill which is where the state outlines its implementation and administration of the compact.
Okay,
This
excellent.
struck me as compact language.
Yeah, okay, we won't touch this, but we'll, that's really the biggest issue that we have to address, I think, in terms of having that last paragraph or set of paragraphs. Okay. All right, committee, any other questions for Nolan on this one? For Ameren on this one? All right. What page are we on? 23, 24?
Yes, 23.
Okay. So what is left in the bill?
That is a good question. We continue to see the commission's powers and authority moving through page 25. Then we get into how the commission goes about its rulemaking process, which is to govern the administration of the commission. That moves into page 26. There's an outline of what the process is for proposed rulemaking, how the notice of proposed rulemaking takes place in terms of dates, times, locations. The commission must give people time to submit written data, facts, opinions. There's going to be an opportunity for a hearing before a rule is adopted. And these public hearings, the commission would publish the time, place, and date of those so that people could participate. The commission would approve or take a final action on the proposed rule by a majority vote of the party administrators. The commission has the authority to consider emergency rules without that notice. However, the scope of emergency rules and the ability to do an emergency rule is limited to when an emergency rule is necessary to meet an imminent threat to public health, safety, or welfare, to prevent a loss of commission or party state funds, or to meet a deadline for the promulgation of an administrative rule that is required by federal law or rule. So there's limited circumstances when rulemaking would take place without that public hearing and that typical public process. And then moving down into page 29, this is about oversight, dispute resolution, and enforcement of the compact. It outlines the ability of the commission to intervene if there's a proceeding that affects the compact. This outlines what the commission would do if they feel that a party state has defaulted in its performance of its obligations and responsibilities under the compact. It includes giving written notice to the party state and other party states about the nature of the default, provide remedial training and specific technical assistance regarding the default. And then if the state in default fails to cure the default, the defaulting state's membership in the compact may be terminated upon an affirmative vote of the majority of administrators. And it notes that termination of membership shall only be imposed if all other means of securing compliance have been exhausted. The defaulting state may appeal the action of the commission by petitioning the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, or the federal district in which the commission has its principal offices. There is a provision in here for dispute resolution upon request by a party state. The commission shall attempt to resolve disputes related to the compact that arise among party states and between party and non-party states. The commission has a rule providing for both mediation and binding dispute resolution for disputes as appropriate. And then in the event the commission cannot resolve disputes among party states, the party states may submit the issues in dispute to an arbitration panel. And then the decision of a majority of the arbitrators shall be final and binding. Then there's enforcement, moving from page 31 into 32. The commission is responsible for enforcing the provisions and rules of this compact. The commission may initiate legal action to enforce compliance with the provisions of the compact and with its rules and bylaws. And the commission may pursue any other remedies available under federal or state law. And then we have the section on effective date, withdrawal, and amendment. So this would become effective once the bill that you are looking at has become effective. And a party state may withdraw from the compact by enacting a statute repealing their enabling statute. And a party state's withdrawal shall not take effect until 6 months after enactment of the repealing statute. The compact can be amended by party states. However, no amendment shall become effective and binding upon the party state unless and until it is enacted into the laws of all party states. And then on page 34, this is where we have our state provisions regarding the implementation and the administration of the compact by the state of Vermont. This outlines that the Vermont State Board of Nursing will be overseeing the administration and enforcement of the compact within the state. And moving into page 35, the executive director of the Vermont State Board of Nursing or designee shall be the administrator for Vermont for this compact. And the State Board of Nursing may adopt rules necessary to implement and enforce the provisions of this subchapter and take disciplinary action against the practice privilege of a nurse practicing under the provisions of the compact. And this is the section that I would recommend that we refer up above, where you want to put in restrictions over what constitutes authority by the state to allow the use of the state's credit by the commission.
Okay. Thank you. This is
You're
so this section would be a separate letter.
It would be a separate letter.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so I did send a copy of the bill to Senator White and asked her if her committee would review it for, the board and commission process. And I don't know, Ameren, if you've gone into that committee yet to review the bill.
I have not gone in yet. No.
Okay, I will double check with Senator White. I know she's been busy with other things. Okay, any final questions for Ameren? Ameren, based on what you've heard, what is it that we have asked you to add in for that last little letter?
What is it? Oh,
Yeah. Our last, the last clarifying language that we'd like to have in the bill.
yes. So what I've heard is that the committee would like any request to use the state of Vermont's credit be a request that is reviewed by the Joint Fiscal Committee. And
Okay.
and that it would be a set period of time for the Joint Fiscal Joint Fiscal Committee to disapprove of the request. Otherwise, the administrator could, or rather, I should say, the state will have been deemed to authorize the use of the state's credit.
Okay.
That's sitting there.
That's good. Okay, that's good. And my only question was, is there an amount that would trigger the joint fiscal process? Is there an amount now, Senator Cummings? Do you know?
No, it's any grant. Right now it's any grant. I'd check
Okay.
with Steve Klein and see
Yeah.
what he's comfortable with.
Okay, so when you're working with Nolan and Steve, Ameren, maybe just make sure that we're not going somewhere we don't want to go in terms of amount. That'll be helpful. Any other questions for Ameren? Okay, so maybe the next time we look at the language, we'll be able to have a comfort level and then look at it, and then maybe the next day consider a vote if the committee is ready to do that. Think about that. Good. So as soon as we get that, Ameren, what you're hearing is that as soon as we get that, then this thing will go on the fast track. So
All right.
that's great.
Okay.
All right. And Lauren doesn't look happy about that at all. All right.
I'm happy to spend as much time on the issue as we need to. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for being here today again. And Rebecca, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. So I think the committee, we're really just about finished for the day, but I wanted to bring up just a couple of issues. One, and Ameren, thank you. We're good. And as I said, I'll be reaching out to Senator White again on this bill to make sure that we haven't run into any traffic jams regarding the board and commission process. So I've got a couple things to talk about. The first of which is Nolan is badgering me again. Is that Nolan has updated the fiscal note for the bill. So that is now posted on our webpage. If you refresh, you should be able to get it. Thank you for that. That's good. All right. Yep, there it is. Okay, the next thing is, I know we've all been concerned about making sure that we are having a say in how federal funds are being used. The House is finishing up some work on a proposal, and I have a draft bill that the House has worked on, and there are some health and welfare things in there that we will talk about. They haven't passed the bill yet, so we'll look at that very soon, and we'll take some time with it. as soon as I figure out what the timeline is, I've asked Jane Kitchell for the timeline on that. Once we get it, we'll put it up on our agenda for discussion. Then and that would include things like Reach Up that I think are so very critical to folks who have been without during the pandemic. Then oh, the other thing is, I know I sent the letter out that House Healthcare rather, received about the primary care practices, and we'll wait. We're getting information back from AHS, and as soon as we have that, we'll either put it up on our agenda or not. Primary care is of utmost importance to us. I spent a long time yesterday with a whole, I don't know how many, the 100, I think, primary care practices and VCHIP talking about how primary care is functioning during this process and how they're compensating for the mental health, youth mental health concerns. So a lot of pediatric concerns, primary care pediatric concerns. And that's something that we are going to have at the really at the forefront of our thinking. It may not happen till after crossover, but it will be especially key as we look at additional federal dollars. And it will also be key as we think about how to improve the system of care and care management with respect to not just to kids, but also adults who have been socially distanced, and provide some prevention recommendations. That one continues to be a need. I know the Education Committee has worked very hard on after school and summer camps, but this is slightly different, and we'll be picking up some of the slack and some of the maybe plugging up some of the gaps as we're going forward. Those are the only things I really wanted to bring up at this point. We've got bills in front of us this week that we'd like to get as close to closure as we can. I think the 2 bills that we looked at today, we may be able to finish up pretty smoothly, I'm hoping. And we've got others we'll be picking up. So that's it. Are we good? No, we're always good, but questions, comments, we're good. All right. So we, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, the bill that's coming to us from the House, is this the CRF bill that?
It's a budget bill.
No, but I'm not talking about the big bill. There's those sort of.
Yeah, no, it's a CRF. We don't call it CRF anymore. It's federal dollars. It is federal dollars.
And Anne, is this the same bill that we were asked about for the broadband stuff, or is there? I'm just trying to keep my bills straight.
If it's coming from the House, I don't think it's the same. Well, no. There is a fast track that's coming from the House.
This is the fast track. And
okay, yes.
So it'll have some of the things that Senate Appropriations was working on was independent. And I think they were working together with House Appropriations. So the fast track is what we're looking at. And Nolan, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's H315. It's called the COVID-19 Relief Bill.
All right.
H315, is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah. I can shoot it out to you. You can find it. It's not it's not done yet, but we have to weigh in on some of the provisions that are there, and we will do that. Anything else? Now we're late. Okay, we're good. I'll see you all later, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So take care.